Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haipong. As you can see, I am joined by Pepe Escobar, geopolitical analyst and independent journalist. Pepe, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you, Danny. Yeah, tell me about it. We are all completely nuts, but it's
Yeah.
good to see you and good to talk to your audience again.
Yes. Hey, everyone, hit the like button as you come on. We're going to get started right away. So, Pepe, you've written a number of columns just in the last few days about what's happening,
Yes.
the latest updates in the Iran war. Iran, once again, pummeled Dimona, Tel Aviv, Israel. It struck two ports in Kuwait overnight. But I wanted to ask you also about, the Strait of Hormuz. There's reports, even just in the last few hours, that Iran has started to push back the remaining ships there and say, no, don't, you can't cross right now. Many believe it's probably because there is an operation that's about to begin, launched by the United States as they send thousands of troops, Marines. They're coming on likely today or tomorrow. And 10,000 are supposedly going to be deployed very soon. But according to U.S. officials talking to Donald Trump, they're saying none of these options for a ground war look very good. I know you've been covering all of this. Where do you see the war right now as of us speaking here as we enter the month-long period? This has gone on for nearly a month now.
Yeah. What's happening in Hormuz today? It's slightly different to what was happening until yesterday. So the column that I published yesterday, a great deal of the column is explaining how it works, which is relatively simple, but quite complex for the owners of the tankers, in fact. Three stages. First of all, they have to submit all the data to a broker connected to the IRGC. It can be a broker in Iran, all across West Asia, in Asia, Islamic countries, it doesn't matter, as long as this broker is working linked to the IRGC. Then the IRGC vetoes all the info. And of course, if you are linked to the US, to Israeli interests, or to the hostile nations, and there are quite a few, forget it. Your tanker won't go through. Uh, if that's not the case, no problem. But first, you have to pay the toll. And the toll is $2 million per tanker. How do you pay the toll? Well, they accept cash, preferably yuan cash, of course, but they accept crypto. So you pay through the Tron crypto blockchain. It's 3 seconds to clear it. Very, very fast. The the ID check is extremely simple. You need a receipt. Then you give the receipt to the broker. Once again, this goes to the RGC and you get the go ahead. But when you get the go ahead, you have to sail through a very specific maritime channel. It's 8 kilometers large, not more than 5 miles, not more than that. And very, very important, and that's what gets important considering what's happening today. North of the island of Kesh, which is a big, big island, and then between Kesh and Larak, which is a very, very small island to the northeast of Kesh. So this is the maritime corridor. And guess what? If there is a marine Normandy style landing, one of the top candidates is the island of Larak. But to get to Larak, they would have to land in Keshem and then from Keshem go by sea to Larak. And that's why the rules they changed from yesterday to today, and no ships are crossing as we speak. Until yesterday, it was fine. Ships from or going to China, India, Pakistan, Iraq, Bangladesh, they were all crossing. And some that had government to government conversations to strike a deal. Example, Sri Lanka and Thailand, they were also crossing. Today, apparently, nobody's crossing because they expect something to happen. But the rules, this new dispensation in the Strait of Hormuz, it will continue to go on, and it's being ratified by law by the Iranian parliament. It's the new rules of the game to cross the Strait of Hormuz. You can say it's a privatization or nationalization of the Strait of Hormuz. Yes, it applies. But most of all, they are doing what the Egyptians do in Suez. You don't cross the Suez Canal for free. You have to pay as well. So Hormuz, they never forced anybody to pay in the history of the Strait of Hormuz. Now it's different. And the Strait of Hormuz, basically, they control it. So, of course, they're entitled to, you have to pay a fee. And people are not complaining. On the contrary, there were people lining up to pay the fee and cross, as long as you are not one of the hostile nations. Yeah. But that brings us to how the situation today is Friday. There is a possibility that something might happen during the weekend. Everybody's talking about it all over the planet, in fact. So obviously, the IRGC Navy that controls, not only that the territorial waters where the tankers are navigating, but also the wider perimeter, which includes south of Kashmir, the rest of the Persian Gulf, to the west of the Strait of Hormuz, all the way to the island of Karg, which is in the northwest part of Hormuz. And also the integration between Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, and the Sea of Oman to the right, all the way to the Sistan Balochistan coast, and then all the way to the Iran-Pakistani border. The IRGC Navy controls all that. So obviously they are on maximum alert because anything can happen or might happen this weekend. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Yeah, no, these are great points, Pepe. And I'm curious on what you made of Iran's response to all of this outside of even the Strait of Hormuz, because according to U.S. intelligence, supposedly one third of Iran's missile system can be accounted for as destroyed, which contradicts Donald Trump's claims alone that everything has been destroyed. Yet every single day we see Iran hammering Tel Aviv, hammering Israel, the Gulf states every single day. But yet you have a situation, it seems like, Pepe, that this is all causing Donald Trump to escalate further, the United States to escalate further, to now pursue what seems to be limited operations that even his people are telling him do not have very good prospects in terms of achieving any objectives. What's your reaction to this in terms of the state of the war? You have the Iranian military taking selfies while they launch missiles. I mean, social media has definitely been lost by the United States in terms of the narrative war. How have you been seeing just the overall shape of this war now as we move into, as you said, what could be this weekend or soon an attempted ground operation of some kind against Iran?
Well, the theater of the absurd around the whole thing, it's beyond any absurdist play. You know, what just showed up in my inbox like 5 minutes ago before we started our conversation. Donald Trump is bored with the war in Iran, and he wants it to finish and move on. Can you believe this shit? The proverbial U.S. official, talking to American mainstream media. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Okay, it was already mind-boggling when he described this as an excursion. And now he's bored with the excursion and he wants to move on. What is this? This is, we need the whole day to start reflecting upon it to come up with a half response. And considering what happened since the beginning of this week, which is a roller coaster in itself, you remember now the first ultimatum which was supposed to expire on a Monday. And then obviously it didn't because he postponed it for another 5 days. And everybody think, of course, because the markets close on Friday, and then there's going to be something during the weekend. That's where we are now. But we still don't know if that's the case. And the negotiations. The negotiation story is one of the most absurdist parts of the theater, the larger theater of the absurd. We knew via Omani diplomats that they translated from Farsi to Pidgin English, in fact, the Iranian proposals to be handed to Heckle and Jekyll. Yes, I'm calling them now Heckle and Jekyll, not Tweedledum and Tweedledee, Witkoff Kushner. So all of you of my generation, you know who Heckle and Jekyll is, right? Okay. The young ones, search on the net, you'll find who Heckle and Jekyll is. Okay, so Heckle and Jekyll, they cannot even understand Pidgin English. Translated by the Omani diplomats, who are very competent, by the way. So they didn't understand what Iran was actually offering, which was quite generous in terms of uranium enrichment, caps, etc. So that was in the beginning of that. And then when the Iranians learned about that, they say, we're not going to talk to these idiots anymore. So the narrative changes, say, okay, the White House is going to send J.D. Vance to talk to Ghalibaf in Islamabad. It should be today, in fact, Friday, today. Why the whole thing didn't happen? First of all, because the Iranians then sent via the usual diplomats, Omanis, but also the Pakistanis, which started to pose as mediators. There's a trio of mediators that came up these past few days, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. But the Pakistanis positioned themselves as, okay, we are the top mediators, and if there is a meeting, it's going to be here in Islamabad. So everybody was, okay, so it's going to be in Pakistan. And at the same time, the Pakistanis betrayed Iran because what Trump said this week, that he got a gift from Iran of 8 tankers full of oil. Guess which flag they were sailing? Pakistan. So this means that they never went to Pakistan. It was, in fact, a trick. And then when they crossed the Strait of Hormuz, because the Iranians believed this was a friendly Muslim nation, the Americans went there and took the whole thing. Result, Pakistani flagships are not transiting the Strait of Hormuz anymore. The Iranians immediately cut them off. But the problem is, during the week, they were positioned to have this, let's say, the first part of the new non-negotiation, non-plan, with the 15-point plan, the American proposal, and the Iranians, of course, look, we said what we want from the beginning. Let's repeat so maybe you understand that now in plain English. Everything that we already know. No more U.S. bases in West Asia, payment of reparations, war damage reparations, end of sanctions. The nuclear program, the civilian nuclear program continues. No restrictions on the missile program. No restrictions on collaboration with the Hezbollah and Ansar Allah, etc. So obviously the two positions are beyond incompatible, right? But then the narrative changed completely again during the week, because now everybody is waiting for the Normandy style landing. And then, it's going to be in Karg. It's going to be in Sistan Baluchistan, near the port of Chabahar. It's going to be in Larak. It's going to be in the Abu Musa Island, which is Iranian, but is also contested by the UAE. And now, I would say the really hair-raising point of all that, of all this back and forth, is that the UAE, for all practical purposes, has already announced that they are entering the war side by side with the Americans. It started with that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal published by the UAE ambassador in the US, Youssef Al Otaiba. It was an absolutely ghastly op-ed, but it was pretty obvious that this is what they want. And why is that, Danny, and all of you? Follow the money. The UAE committed $1.4 trillion of deals with the US in the investments in the American economy, AI, semiconductors, you name it. So that's it. They have to follow their money. And for that to happen, they need to have the economy of the Emirates back online. And at the moment is a total disaster. Dubai, as we know it, the business model of Dubai is already dead. Abu Dhabi, very, very similar. The port of Jebel Ali is paralyzed. And Jebel Ali is one of the key ports in the, I would say, the mini empire of ports of the UAE. They have port deals everywhere. Haifa, no, I'm sorry, in Syria. What's the name of that port, Danny? It escapes me now. My brain is turning to mush.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly. The port where the Russians, there's a naval base of the Russians as well in Syria.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I'm sure all of you watching, you know where that is. I have a blank now. And also in Aqaba, in Jordan, which is the only cargo port in Jordan. The Emiratis are there as well.
I think it's Tartus. Tartus.
Tartus. I'm sorry, everybody. Yes, Tartus. So the thing is, they need to keep their empire of ports, especially these three, because these are three key ports for Asia to Europe maritime connectivity corridors. So it's all about their ports and their money and the fact that they are being sidelined, especially by the Saudis. The Saudis have other plans about cargo between Europe and Asia going through the Persian Gulf. So they are desperate. And so they need, of course, and it's in the op-ed and it's in what UAE officials are saying, that we need to contain the Iranian threat. It's total bullshit. It's because they are losing money and their business model is collapsing in front of them. So if they do that, the fascinating Iranian response is already on, because they already published a list of 5 mega targets that are going to be hit if the UAE enters the war. So the situation is even more complicated than in the middle of the week. So we have the Pakistani betrayal, the Pakistani positioning as mediators, which collapsed completely. And we have the economy of the Emirates collapsing at the same time. But now their solution is, okay, let's get into the war. So it gets worse and worse. I defined it in the beginning of the week as the inferno escalation machine. And the inferno escalation machine gets worse day by day. We have no idea what can happen or may happen this weekend, but something will happen in the next few days that's going to be catastrophic, whatever that is. If it's going to be a mini Normandy landing, if it's going to be like the Secretary of Forever Oz is saying, that it's going to be a mega bombing campaign to inflict the final blow against the already defeated Iran, as we. So, and obviously, all of us, we barely keep up with it, because it's the speed is completely out of control. The level of dementia is completely out of control. And of course, there are very few rational actors intervening. The Russians are not saying anything. They're just watching. The Chinese are just watching. The Europeans don't exist, of course. They're already buried. So that's it. We continue to be hostages of the deranged baboon of Barbaria. What is going to come up next?
Well, what's shocking, Pepe, is that the scenarios here Not only are they being admitted as not having any really good outcomes, but the overall landscape seems to contradict the very actions that are being pursued, whether it's the UAE,
Mhm.
Saudi, all wanting to get further and deeper into the war, Trump and the US wanting to conduct some kind of ground operation. It doesn't conform with reality, which is that they're even the US officials, the New York Times, elsewhere, are admitting that the U.S. posture, in its very presence in the region, has been almost entirely destroyed. That was admitted by the New York Times. Israel is
Mhm.
saying their military is on the verge of collapse very soon
Correct.
if they have to continue to fight Hezbollah, which is kicking their behinds. I think something like 80, some ridiculous number of tanks
Almost
destroyed
100 Merkavas. Almost
in what
100
in
Merkavas.
24
And
to
counting.
48, just ridiculous numbers. So they're dealing with that. Kiryat Shimona under Hezbollah and Iranian missile fire. They're saying, the chief of staff is saying, the Israeli military could collapse any minute if this continues onward, this war. So the situation doesn't look good. And Trump said he's not desperate. He said this to the media. He's not desperate. He just doesn't care, which is a shocking
Yeah,
uh,
true.
statement to make when the reality just doesn't look good in front of the U.S., Israel, and the aggressors, the hostile parties, as they're being called in the Strait of Hormuz. So why then move in this direction? It seems like it's almost like a collapsing situation that only gets worse from here if these moves are taken. But maybe I'm wrong. Pepe, what do you think?
No, no. In fact, anything that he's going to do from now on will worsen the situation. And the only thing that he won't, in fact, he might do, he could declare victory tomorrow. After all, he's already bored with the war. Why not declare victory? After all, I destroyed everything. So that's it. I declare victory and I leave. Is this going to change the out of control casino that he installed on the global economy, not only in the Persian Gulf? No. Iran will continue to do what they're doing. They will continue to devastate what is not already devastated in terms of US interests everywhere. The bases are all practically gone. Apparently, it's over 90% of everything in those bases is destroyed already. But there are other US interests around the Persian Gulf, and that includes, for instance, data centers. And that's where the UAE comes once again into the picture. And of course, if the UAE decides to enter the war, then Iran has a second wind to go after the UAE and destroy their economy completely, just like they are destroying now from now on with the new missiles, extremely precise, and obviously with no more Arrow 3, David Sling, THAAD, Patriot, all that crap. They can, attack Israel at will, the way they want it, every day, 2 or 3 times a day, which is exactly what they're doing now. They will continue to do that because it's part of the, let's say, the two top priorities: inflict major damage to Israel, possibly irreversibly, and destroy all U.S. military bases in West Asia, so they cannot be rebuilt and they won't come back. Everything else is interconnected. Of the everything else interconnected, the most important part is what is already in effect in the Strait of Hormuz, let's say until today. The free passage for all those tankers who fill the three conditions, it will be back because now it's being formalized by the Iranian parliament. It's the new rules of the game in the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, it's an excellent source of a petro yuan for the IRGC and for the Iranian government. So it will come back to normal. And of course, they know that all the other stranded tankers, they will, and they will pay the $2 million, which, considering the situation, is not much. So the key point, which this is the game changer in geoeconomic terms, and in terms of the construction of, the much debated multipolar world. We have an alternative payment system working around the petro yuan, established and working in the most important choke point on the planet. This is the big, big, big fact of this war. And obviously, Russia is looking at it, China is looking at it. I would not say the BRICS in deep coma are looking at it, but maybe some BRICS members and partners of the BRICS are looking at it. And the whole global south paid attention to it. So there's no turning back on this one. This is already in effect. It's what a zillion BRICS summit could not achieve. It was achieved with one move by Iran. So the repercussions are going to be immense. It's the petro yuan in effect for everybody to see, for the whole planet to see. The toll booth, the petro yuan, and then you can sail, no problem, no extra problem, no problem later, whatever. So this is the most important thing. And Iran, after they establish that, they will defend this new modus operandi with everything that they have, which, by the way, they have not used yet, right, Danny? Very, very important.
Yes. Yep.
Very, very important. All those invisible underground missile cities, most of them are in the southeast of Iran and in the eastern part of Iran near the Afghan border. The Americans don't even know where they are. That's why they have not been bombed by the push-up clown Secretary of Forever Wars yet, because they don't know where they are. So Iran has not even used them yet. So the way they are tweaking their decentralized mosaic strategy, there's always a little tweak every 2 or 3 days, but it's, incrementally, the pain is getting more and more unbearable, especially for Israel. And it's no wonder that now they cannot even censor and disguise what's happening inside Israel. Even with that mega censorship, it's too obvious, it's too blatant. And anybody anywhere with a cell phone can film the missiles arriving practically nonstop. So that already changed. And if the UAE, they make this supreme blunder of getting into the war, what's happening to Israel now is going to happen to them. Exactly the same thing. And their economy is going to be paralyzed. And it's not going to be only the Dubai bling bling money laundering model that is kaput, which is already, it's going to be the whole Emirates model, including everything, the AI centers, the data centers, the ports, the airports, you name it. Those gleaming airlines, which, by the way, are quite decent. That's it. Over.
Yeah, and Iran also has warned that, I saw reports, especially coming out of Iranian media, that if the UAE, if Gulf states get involved in any kind of ground operation, any kind of attack on Iranian territory, the UAE and Bahrain could be occupied, that Iranian forces are willing to, because I think Bahrain was once part of Iran not too long ago.
Bahrain was part of Iran before 1971, Danny. Just like, by the way, very few people know, the Emirates.
Yeah.
It was in 1971 that there was a split. The Emirates were part of Oman. And that's great. This is something I put in my latest column. I heard from Iraqi scholars. I was watching a debate with Iraqi scholars, absolutely fascinated. And the Iraqi analysts and scholars are wonderful. They have a sense of history, absolutely impeccable, very detailed. And they were saying openly, oh, of course, what's going to happen? Kuwait is going to be back to us. After all, Kuwait was part of the province of Basra. So it's going to come back to us. Bahrain is going to come back to Iran. The Emirates probably going to go back to Oman. The thing is, Saudi Arabia, what are they going to do? They could even, in the long run, annex Qatar. It's not out of the question. Qatar, they have been very, very clever. Qatar and Oman are the only two of the GCC who actually, on the record, said, "Look, we condemned everything that is happening. We are not. We want a coexistence with Iran, and our territory is not being used to attack Iran." Very clever move because they literally they see which way the wind is blowing. So later on, they're gonna have Iran is gonna treat them favorably, to say the least,
Well,
right?
especially Qatar because of what happened to Qatar Energy not too long ago. I think they
Well, they
learned a
understood
lesson.
in the flesh, literally, right, Danny? What happens if you mess with, especially if you mess with the energy infrastructure of Iran? And this is exactly what's going to happen with the UAE. Much, much worse. This list that now it's already published, it's everywhere of the five targets. It's everything. It includes the desalination plants as well. Not only power stations, but also desalination plants. So MBZ, well, MB, as we all know, of course, all of you, our audience, you know, MBZ is a bloody gangster. You know that. Everybody knows that. In fact, he's the gangster that taught MBS to be even more of a gangster. It's one gangster advising another. MBS is apparently he's better at juggling the whole thing. He knows that if he antagonizes Iran directly, the consequences for the Saudi energy infrastructure with the help of Yemen, which is over there, just looking at everything with their missiles, including their own hypersonic missiles. So he has to be very, very careful, even though we all know all their money is in London and New York. So he cannot antagonize the Americans by definition. And of course, MBS still believes that the IMAC is going to work, just like the Emirates. Both still believe that the IMAC is going to work. The IMAC, the name is extremely misleading. It's not India, Europe, Middle East corridor. In fact, the most important player in this scam is not even named, is Israel. This is a corridor so Israel can be at the center of trade between Europe and Asia, in this case, India, with the help of the Emirates and the Saudis. But they will have to build a lot of infrastructure, linking Israel with the Emirates and Saudi. None of that has been built yet. So IMAC at the moment is completely stalled. And that's another reason for the Emirates to enter the war side by side with the Americans. The Saudis, for the moment, they're masters of hedging. They're not saying anything explicit. We all know that before the war, MBS was telling via his super Paul on WhatsApp, Jared Kushner, MBS was telling Trump, go for it, attack Iran. And now there are echoes coming from different parts of the Persian Gulf that, yes, this has not changed at all. But it's not explicit. That's the difference. From the UAE, now it's explicit. Everybody knows that the UAE is ready to enter the war. Saudi, they are slightly more discreet, although they are already part of the war. No question about that. But if this becomes a blatant from an Iranian point of view, wow. If you are in Saudi Arabia, better leave as soon as you can.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, it's stunning too because the Iranian military also put out word, and I think this shows where things are at. They put out word that they have 1 million troops. They have 1 million forces
1 million.
ready to confront
Yes.
the United States. Mind you, the U.S. is talking about 10,000 at some point in the future, a couple of thousand paratroopers, 4,000 or so Marines. They're talking really small numbers. And we know, Pepe, that all of this has to do with the Strait of Hormuz. It all has to do
Of
with
course.
trying to gain leverage over Iran through energy. So, Pepe, what does this do to the oil markets and the entirety of the unipolar controlled financial system? Because we already saw like $1 trillion wiped away from Wall Street in a day, just because this war continues to go on, and there keeps there, Donald Trump's hedging and bluffing and threatening, and claiming that there's a pause to this war coming and Iran is groveling at his feet. None of this seems to be, it seems that the oil markets and the general financial system controlled by the United States is really teetering on disaster. And these attempts to manipulate it are becoming less and less effective, especially given the fact that Iran is putting in very concrete moves on the as you said, the geoeconomic scale to essentially manifest, as the kids say these days, a reality that is very contradictory to what the U.S. aims ultimately are. Because some have argued that this is really great for the U.S. empire, and in many respects, there's a lot of problems arising out of this. What do you make of Iran's posture, even just on the sense of its confidence militarily? They're inviting them, saying, "Come, please, come closer. We're ready." They said that we've been training everybody too. That we're all ready. Everyone is ready. We're ready. Iraq is ready. Yemen is ready. Everybody. Hezbollah, of course, is like everyone's ready to fight a ground war. What do you make of this posture from Iran? Because I think it. Some would say it's propaganda. It's hard to believe that Iran is bluffing here, given what we've seen over the last 20 plus days.
There's no bluff. It's their strategy, and it's their incremental strategy, following the same principles, tweaking the decentralized mosaic, but the objectives, the targets remain the same. And these are the key targets. We have to repeat it over and over again. Establish their deterrence, which has already been established for the whole planet to see. Fighting the so-called biggest army in the history of the galaxies. Number two, expelling the US from the Persian Gulf little by little. The first part, let's say the first segment, is destroying the military bases. That's practically accomplished. And number three, establish their deterrence vis-a-vis Israel. This is something that nobody expected would be so fast. They did that in 3 weeks. Israel is in total disarray now, and the situation can only get worse day after day. So these are the main objectives. So it's when you look at it as a holistic, organic mechanism, it makes total sense, and they are applying pressure in all the points that really matter. So if UAE wants to enter the war, this has already been gamed by Tehran, no problem. If the whole of GCC wants to enter the war, they also gamed that. If there is the attempt of a land bridge leading to a mini ground invasion later, same thing, it's already gamed. It's more complicated vis-a-vis the toll booths in the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, they thought about that before, but nobody could possibly expect that they would implement it in a matter of 3 or 4 days, up and running, and until today was up and running with no glitches. And everybody accepted, because okay, we need to go from A to B via the Strait of Hormuz.
Wasn't that was Iran's gift to Trump, right? Donald Trump was talking about this big gift.
Gift to Trump, exactly. You bet. Okay. Now let's look at the other side. Let's look at the megalomaniac, narcissistic psycho killer who is now bored with the war that he started. Why he backed off in the beginning of the week? Because he was looking at the oil market, at the numbers, and he was looking at the bond market. Much more important, in fact, than the oil market. Because the bond market can tell the US that you cannot pay for anything anymore and you're going to collapse. So before the end of the ultimatum, the 10-year yield on the US Treasuries was approaching 5%. In fact, it went over 5%, then it got back. It got back to 4.4, 4.5 after his postponing. And now it's back to 4.4, 4.5 again and going up little by little. So if this happens next week with the possibility of a mini land invasion, he's going to have to back off necessarily. So in fact, it's fascinating because the bond market may in the end save all of us. Literally, from a bigger catastrophe, not the oil market. The oil market, everybody now is starting to live, okay, oil is going to be around 100 and there's nothing we can do about it. Between 100 and 110 and all that. Okay, but if things get much worse next week, it can get to 120. And after 120, the sky is the limit. Okay, switching back to that character who has his hand on $14 trillion. Larry Fink from BlackRock. The guy gives an interview to the BBC where basically he says there are two scenarios. One, we're going to have oil at $40 a barrel. Two, we're going to have oil at $150 a barrel. He's not betting on anything. He's hedging. BlackRock doesn't bet like that. BlackRock hedges all the time. But at least he said out loud, if it's $150 a barrel, this is a global recession. What he did not say is that at $120 a barrel, which we are on the brink, it's also a global recession. And the global recession has already started. And the disturbances in different latitudes, a little bit everywhere, here in Southeast Asia, in India, are already on. In Europe, wow, when it breaks, oh, just wait. In Europe, it's going to be within the next months or so, considering that they have no gas. Now they don't have gas from Qatar, and they don't have gas from Russia. And okay, Heckle and Jackal, how can we call those two female idiots over there? We have to find out something. For the moment, is the Estonian chick with an IQ comparable to a discombobulated worm and the toxic medusa. Okay, these two. They're stupid enough not to backtrack and try to find a way of getting more gas from Russia. They won't do that. So Europe is going to pay the price for these two idiots. That's where we are. But this is, well, Europe has already committed political suicide. Everybody, the whole planet, people in the sub-Saharan Africa desert already know that. Everybody knows that. So the cascading effects are already, most parts of the planet are already suffering. And all that, everything that is happening was caused by one fateful decision. The guy who is now bored decided to launch a war because the Zionist donors and the Zionist international axis told him to.
Yeah. Pepe, what is this?
Yes, yeah. I know. It looks like we're talking about a Monty Python sketch, right, Danny? But this is the reality in front of all of us.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask you, Pepe, what does this say about the limits of the U.S. imperial, especially on the military front, power, given that the volatility of the global financial system that the U.S. Dominates via the dollar is very much teetering on a monumental crisis, already in one, as many have noted, as you outlined there. This seems like something that you put two and two together doesn't really comport. You have the United States wanting, on the one hand, to follow along and work with Israel to destroy Iran, and the entire global economy saying, well, if you try to do that and you're failing and you fail, you don't do it quick enough, and you don't have any plan in place, and you attack the energy markets, then it all goes up in smoke anyway. So it does feel like we are in a moment of a dead end, and that Iran potentially has wiped
Yes.
away. A lot of people thought from 2023, October 7th onward, that Israel and the U.S. gained a lot via, the genocide, what happened in Lebanon, Syria, all of this. It seems like Iran, in just 3 or 4 weeks, has wiped away any of those gains with all of the
So,
destruction they've caused to the Gulf, to Israel, and the political and geopolitical implications of this, and not to mention the Strait of Hormuz, which has created a petro-yuan disaster in front of the empire. What do you make of this broader picture of how this changes things geopolitically, given that there are no good outcomes here? The very financial markets and the very financial system the U.S. dominates is in crisis, and Iran's maneuvers, its strategy, has essentially, it seems like, wiped away, at least what we're hearing from the New York Times even, seems to have wiped away a lot of the gains that the U.S. and Israel were claiming they had made up until February 28th.
the most extraordinary thing is that they did this by themselves, Danny, alone. A nation, 47 years of absolutely horrible, nasty sanctions. When you visit Iran, there are so many places that you see the effects of nearly 5 decades of sanctions in front of you. And I saw this in my latest trip. I saw this in ports, in airports, in urban infrastructure, in old hotels, you name it, in lots of houses, old houses that are falling apart. It's sewage systems. It's heartbreaking, and you know that all that is because of 47 years of sanctions, and still they have immense human capital, some of the best universities in the world. The quality of their engineers, technicians, mathematicians, physicists is absolutely outstanding. They built an enormous hidden industrial military complex that is scaring the shit out of the superpower. They are fighting by themselves against one nuclear superpower and another nuclear, very, very strong regional power. And and they're playing their game, and they're inflicting serious punishment on both. All of that is immensely impressive. So it's no wonder when you see reactions from Africa, from Latin America, from Southeast Asia, from Central Asia, people are absolutely amazed. And even people who don't follow politics, they have to confess in public their admiration to Iran, and they understand that Iran is fighting for the absolute majority of the planet. There's no question about that. This is the larger. I don't want to get into the scatological aspects. I think, and this for most people, it's people are looking at the practicalities of this war. So on a practical level and on a in your face level, this is something that nobody could possibly expect to happen until 3 weeks ago. It's
Yeah.
so the planet is stunned by the resistance, by the fact that we are talking about a sovereign resistance, a sovereign nation, a regional power, harassed, attacked, bombed, you name it, but still they resist, and they are turning the game around against the aggression. It's absolutely extra. It's going to take us a long time to process that study. That this will be for future historians probably. But the point of inflection of the 21st century, it's going to be now. Everybody thought it was 9/11. Obviously, it was not. 9/11 was the beginning of the end of the American century or American hegemony. The real point of inflection is now, because we have one mid-ranking regional power turning the game around by themselves.
Yep.
Amazing. Okay, you can do that because you have 2,500 years of history. Don't mess with the Persians. If you do, this proves that you are beyond stupid and you didn't do your homework. And of course, these people in Washington, they don't even know what a homework is. For
Well,
that matter.
JD Vance said that Iranians were going to strap nuclear powered vests to their chest and
He
die
actually
that
said
Americans. Yes, this is part of the
this guy
flurry.
went to Yale. What the fuck did he study in Yale?
It's the carousel of this is why we're at war with Iran. You know, it just constantly changes. But I think it demonstrates exactly what you said, that there's not even a desire or an attempt to understand what's going on here, Pepe. And I feel like, and I'm wondering your reaction to this as we get to the last 5 or 10 minutes here. Russia and China's posture. It seems to me that in many respects, they're relative quiet in this war could be that they see Iran resisting, and they've provided assistance in areas that they can and that they're willing, and it seems like everything is working, and they stand to gain out of this because despite all of the damage, and of course it's horrible what's happening to Iranian people, the aftermath that's already building up appears to be that these three powers not only remain and that Iran remains, but that there'll be a major consolidation toward the direction of Russia and China, given that the U.S. alone is blowing up its reputation. I mean, we already knew, me and you and people who watch the show, we knew that, the U.S. Has no interest other than elite interests. But now we see the entire world has watched as the U.S. blows up the entire global financial system just to pursue the aims that, Zionists and the oligarchs and et cetera want to pursue. That's a huge thing. So your thoughts about Russia and China's posture and how the RIC, as you've called it, the real RIC, fares from here, as this war will likely drag on to some point, but it will eventually, the strikes will eventually stop, and there will be an aftermath.
Well, Russia and China, they are elevating something to a form of art. Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a serious mistake. And that explains why they are so silent. It is a form of art. Beautifully, of course, Putin, and she talked about it. There's no question they talked about that. First of all, because of the interlocking strategic partnerships at various levels. The RIC, they have strategic partnerships, the three of them. It does not include a military pact, very, very important, but includes discussions at the level of Ministry of Defense at the highest level, and includes what the Russians will never, of course, forget about any leak from Moscow specifying how they are helping Iran. Not going to happen. Same thing about China. We all know what China is supplying Iran with, but forget about a specific admission coming from Beijing. They don't need to. The results are there. The level of accuracy of the targeting, the 24/7 SAT intel information, crystal clear, identification of war plans of the Americans with the Russians provided to the Iranians before the war. All that, we know all that, but they don't have, but just watching. And what should they say? They know that, for instance, even if they try to make a move in the UN Security Council, nothing will happen because the UN is already dead, as we all know. The UN is walking dead. So Russia and China didn't even bother about that. They're looking at the practical results in the battlefield. For instance, the Iranians learn a lot of lessons that the Russians learned by themselves in Ukraine. So this level of information was transferred from Moscow to Tehran. No question about that. And of course, the Chinese, in terms of the reorientation of moving from GPS to Beidou, for instance, essential. So they are integrated with Chinese info in real time. And of course, there's the matter of, especially the Russians, they know that, which is something that even Putin said on the record. The Iranians didn't ask us for anything, which was a very clever way of saying, if they do, we will provide it. But they didn't. And in fact, what they asked was started, I would say, around 2023. 23, 24, 27, around 2023, these past 3 years, because there were always Iranian missions going to Moscow, and they were discussing with the Ministry of Defense as well. So obviously they had a list of stuff that they were interested in, and the Russians said, no problem. And at the same time, when we start to discover that the Shaheeds used by Iran in the battlefield are in fact geraniums with the Comet antennas from Russia, then everybody could establish the pattern. Okay, from the Shaheeds sold to the Russians perfected the Shaheeds, they turned it into geraniums of latest generation, and the geraniums went back to Iran, and now they are in the battlefield. This kind of stuff. But it takes quite a while to certify that this is happening. So they don't need to do anything. Of course, if they see that Iran which all the indications that we have at the moment, it is on the contrary, that Iran has its backs against the wall, obviously Russia and China will do something more forceful, perhaps even more visible. But that's not the case. On the contrary. And on a geoeconomic level, wow. For China, what's going on is beyond precious. The whole petro-yuan angle, wow. It's something that China could not achieve with, I would say, with 20, 30 years of diplomacy, of geoeconomic diplomacy. They achieved in 3 weeks. and not themselves. One of their allies gave this on a platter to China. Okay, we have the petro-yuan working as an alternative payment system in reality, not in BRICS summits.
Yep.
You cannot beat that. You cannot beat that.
In less than a month.
Comparisons, Danny, okay, we would need an extra conversation about the interaction of the war in Ukraine and the war against Iran. That's an extremely complex subject. And for instance, there are some echoes in Moscow. For instance, a lot of stuff that was planned to take place in Moscow these next few weeks, and that's one of the reasons where I will probably be back there next month, along with Larry Johnson, some of our friends, is not happening because they were canceled, because the attention of the Kremlin, it's on the war. They are studying the war by the millimeter, you see? And of course, very, 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 very interesting. There was a meeting, today's Friday, I think this meeting was yesterday or Wednesday night, if I'm not mistaken. There was a private meeting between Putin and top businessmen, including oligarchs. And after the meeting, the head of the Federation of Russian Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, Shoshkin is a very clever guy. I met him in Moscow 3 years ago, more or less. He said that Putin is convinced that the war will finish in maximum 4 weeks. So obviously he has information that none of us have. And this is what he told the oligarchs and the industrialists. So for the next 4 weeks, their total attention is what could come next. And obviously, we know that there are all those oligarchic channels, US, Russia, and they are talking to each other. The oligarchies on both sides are talking to each other, and obviously they talk about the war as well. But what is going on in the war on Iran? How could it affect the war between NATO and Russia? That's a completely different, that's a very volatile story. And I'm sure you and many of you, our audience, know that there's a serious discussion in Moscow after those attacks against Primorsk, Ust-Luga, basically the Russian energy infrastructure, export infrastructure, oil exports in the Baltic, etc. And a lot of very well-informed and well-connected people. It comes back, and it always comes back, and comes back to the same point. It's time to cut off the head of this thing. This has gone on too long. But at the same time, we all know that this is not the way Putin runs business. So this is going to be very complicated. I'm very curious to see how this is going to be discussed in Russia, assuming the war goes on for another 4 weeks after that, right?
Yeah, well, we'll have to keep in touch with you, Pepe. We'll definitely be back on this program as things develop on all fronts. I want to make sure everybody knows that your X and Telegram are both in the video description for people to check out, as well as your column that's published.
Yeah, the columns. I make a lot of suggestions, reading suggestions, links, etc. So it can be helpful to all of you.
Yeah, everyone check that out. Hit the like button as you go. Because that will help keep the conversation going for new viewers who haven't been able to watch this yet in YouTube's algorithm. Also, thanks to everyone who gave a super chat. Thanks to all the moderators, of course. I'll be back tomorrow with our mutual friend, Mohammed Marandi, about 2 p.m. Eastern time. So be ready for that, March 28th. Until next time, everyone, we're held out together. Take care. And thanks, Pepe, again.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, everybody.